Hey, what's up, guys? Node Investor here. What a week! What a week it has been. We're going to be looking at the broader market space. Of course, we're going to look at stocks. We're going to look at gold. Markets reacting. The stocks had a brutal sell-off this morning, or this week. Continuing this morning, finding a little bit of bounce finally. I was trying to delay the trading here, or this live stream, because I had some open trades going. There's finally getting a little bit of a short squeeze. I'm looking for some more pop. I took some trades on Apple and AMD. So far, so good. We'll see how that one plays out. So I might be a little distracted here until those trades are closed out. I've got some automatic sell orders already in place, so hopefully I don't have to do anything other than that. But let's see here, man. Yeah, stocks, one for the record books. The stock market, at least in the U.S., has some, the top biggest weekly sell-offs. I mean, this week alone, the Dow Jones, at least intraday, saw multiple 1,000+ point down days, and which is just amazing for something like that. And when you look at it on a percentage basis, yeah, the stock market was down something like 15% or whatever at the lows. Doesn't sound like a lot, but when you start thinking about the valuations, we're talking tens of trillions of dollars, and not just in the U.S., but you look at the FTSE, you look at the DAX, you look at the Hang Seng, and all across the world, it's the same thing. The Nikkei overnight, where's the Nikkei, was dropping significant drops, and so it's just pretty much the same view everywhere you look. It's been the brutal sell-off across the globe. I mean, everywhere, as the markets react finally to the coronavirus and some of that. And again, I know it's not a lot on a percentage basis. You look at that, okay, we're only down back to where we were in September and October. But the velocity, the fact that the markets gave back all of those gains, basically 5-6 months worth of gains in some cases, in a week, is significant. It's only 15%, but it is significant. And you look at I think the global market cap for stocks, and that, of course, that doesn't include derivatives and leverage instruments, and we really can get deep in that area. It doesn't include bonds, which is insane how big it is. But I think global stocks is something like $60 trillion, with the U.S. being almost half that. So when you see a drop in the terms of 15%, it's a lot. It's a lot. For something like Bitcoin, it's a lot, but it's a little bit more commonplace in crypto. We're kind of a little desensitized to the moves when they're that drastic. But even crypto, I mean, crypto saw a pretty good sell-off here this week. So I'm going to be going over the macro charts. We'll be looking at the big picture, looking at the stocks charts, gold charts, oil hitting some lows, the dollar index, and of course, we're going to deep dive a lot of these crypto charts. What are my thoughts right now? What am I doing in terms of, this dip, taking advantage? It's been trading a little bit here. Took a quick bounce trade, what was it, day before yesterday, sold out into that yesterday, saw it pulling back here this morning, so I'm liking it again, kind of starting to dip my toes back in here. Took some gains on the bounce, but I'm liking ETH here. I posted this chart here in the Slack group. Looks like it's playing out nicely. This was actually the 4-hour view is what it should have been there. So I'll go over that in much more detail, what my thought process was in this chart and why I am reinitiating my positions here on this double bottom that's potentially forming here. So what do we got going on here? Looking at the comments here, what's going on, guys? We got a lot of folks starting to come in. Melissa in the house, hope you're doing well. I'm doing good, thank you. Right, Kabul. Welcome, everybody. I know a lot of you guys are regulars, longtime listeners. We got a bunch of the Node insiders here in the house as well. What's going on, Steven? So thanks for being here, guys. I think I posted all the links here. I did, so we should just be able to get right to it. So again, this is going to be, normally I'll do kind of like a end of week video to kind of market wrap up type of thing, but I'm going to just do that live with here on the live stream. And at the end, I'll save some time for some review of other stuff, what's going on, and we'll kind of deep dive some charts. But looking at the week, going on to the broader crypto market cap first. I'm going to start with the market cap, looking at the BTC Dominance what happened. Of course, everybody knows what happened here this week. Quite the sell-off here. We finally broke trend on that market cap. Total market cap, remember a couple weeks ago, was 300 plus billion. And you know, once it started to turn, there was a good chance that downtrend was going to continue. And for those of you that have been following along, I believe I said, you know, I'm expecting 1 to 2 weeks of pullback. I didn't know how deep the pullback was going to go. It just felt like it was time. And holy moly, the pullback was, you know, fast and furious there for a little while. But there we go. Market cap pulling right back into that $230 billion mark, bouncing here a little bit, getting a little double bottom here. If you look at the 4-hour view, again, this is the short-term 4-hour view, a little potential double bottom forming, still trending lower though. This could just as easily form a lower high and just continue to drop. But if we go zoom out here on the total market cap picture, it is starting to come into a little bit of a support zone here. If you look left here, of course, that big base, then this was resistance back here, November, October. A little bit of a resistance here. That was the breakout. And now we're pulling right back into that zone. So ideally, it'd be nice if the bulls can start to show up here and show a little bit of resilience and some bounce action here. Looking at the Btc Dominance Chart here. This is the chart I was expecting to see some bounce. It's pretty much bounced into almost the target zone that I was looking for. This is the one I'm going to be paying attention to because we've seen the BTC Dominance turn to the downside here over the last few months, right? Basically since the start of 2020. And that's a good thing because if you're trading on the altcoins, this means the altcoins are outperforming. And we saw that very nice moves in many of those alts here 2 months ago. And they were due for a pullback. I mean, they were just kind of going parabolic. It was getting very euphoric. I thought if the market pulls back, you're going to see the BTC dominance spike because typically the altcoins are high beta names. So they'll outperform on the way up, but they'll also underperform on the way down. So that's what we saw, a little bit of a bounce. But now the question is this the end of the bounce? We got another little leg higher and then the pullback. Ultimately, however it plays out, whether this is the end or we bounce into that 68%, 67, 68, ultimately I think it'll turn again and then we'll start to see the altcoins resume their performance to the upside. So if Bitcoin can find a low, pay attention to some of those altcoins, especially the leaders, because they may be some good early indicators as to the market turning and finding some support. But for now, it's still a little bit too early to tell. You'll notice when we get into the charts here, but BTC dominance here back at around 65%, did peak a little bit here a couple of days ago, not much higher. So 65, 66% is where we saw that Bitcoin dominance here. Now going to the macro picture here, before I go deep dive into the stock market or the Bitcoin charts, excuse me, I do want to spend a little bit of time looking at the broader stock market because we are seeing this reaction across the board finally to the concerns, the global concerns about a pandemic and all that fun stuff. And yikes, I mean, if you read the news, if you're on Twitter and you're all that, it's pretty much the end of the world. It's like everyone's going to die, that we're going to all run out of medical supplies, everything's going to shut down. The financial markets are going to collapse. It's going to be draconian martial law. And oh my God, like you read the news and you just forget it, turn it off because it's very distracting. It's very concerning. I'm now finally starting to get the phone calls, which leads me to believe we're going to reach a little bit of a near-term low here. I hope. I'm crossing my fingers, right? It's kind of another weekend. And it was interesting because last Friday, my thoughts were, this will be an interesting weekend. If the news turns out to be worse, look out on Monday. And whoa, little did I expect that it was going to turn out this week. But we saw that big gap down on Monday, never recover, just continue to slice lower. And, you know, we're kind of reaching a little bit of a capitulation point for a lot of stockholders in the near term. Doesn't mean that it's over, but in the near term. But it's going to be interesting to see what the big bankers start to come out with over the weekend. They're going to start to backstop the system. And I find it ironic that they think the solution to everything is always more liquidity. Coronavirus, more liquidity. You know, financial crisis, more liquidity. You know, there's a problem with their interest rates. Remember the repo markets? You probably don't hear a whole lot about that anymore, but more liquidity. And it's just like pump it into the system. At some point, the market will not react to that anymore. And so we're starting to see a little bit of that. But you saw the global markets really take it in the chin this week. There's the Qs, the NASDAQ here. This represents, you know, Apple and the bigger tech stocks. But, I mean, giving back most of this crazy breakout, and the volume on the week was significant. I mean, just crazy big volume. You saw the last week, the bond market, the U.S. Treasuries, right, starting to hit all-time lows on many of those yields as things just continue to drop. We looked at some of the other markets here, but if you go across the globe, it's pretty much the same point of view. Almost every major index, stock index, has had a big drop this week everywhere in the world. Europe, Asia, the Americas. I mean, they're pretty much all the same, to different magnitudes, but pretty much getting it in the chin here this week. Now gold. Looking at gold, of course, gold has been in the news a lot. Not Barrick, excuse me. Gold, the metal, is finally seeing a pretty good drop here today. We saw the dollar index really rally overnight. We saw gold kind of spike into that 1700, quick pullback down. And it's interesting. It's always interesting because, you know, I read the sentiment. I pay attention to some of that, not as a trading indicator per se, but it's always kind of like starts giving me some signals as to the timing of things. And it's funny because after the big run up, after gold's already over 1600, pushing 1700, I started seeing all kinds of articles talking about these are the gold stocks to buy, and oh, you guys should start going long gold. And even in the crypto sphere, everyone's starting to be talking about gold again. And it's like, well, we've already seen the big push. At least wait for a pause and look at the big spike down as the markets are reversing here a little bit. So, you know, just be on guard for that FOMO, the last minute, when you start to see it all over the media. Very often, like, it's kind of late a little bit, so just something to keep in mind here. But this pullback is happening now. If we go to the Forex markets and look at the FTSE or the Dixie, you can see the US dollar was bouncing here, try to bounce overnight, but it's crazy because they're all falling in tandem, right? So the US dollar rallied, is pulling back as gold pulls back, which is unusual. Usually they move inverse. There's not that one there. Where's the euro dollar? Where we at? Here we go. The euro dollar is spiking here, which typically that's good for gold. They tend to move. So it's just kind of interesting that things are just so dislocated right now. The dollar yen here, big pattern forming on this guy, but finally cracking down. So there's a lot of things moving in the markets. Doesn't matter where you're at, whether it's crypto, whether it's stocks, whether it's Forex, whether it's commodities, gold. If we look at oil, just everything is moving right now. There's a lot of stuff going on here. Let me go to the oil markets. There you go. The oil futures, right? They're just taking it in the chin here. Oil down to $44 a barrel. That's quite the drop here, hitting the 2019 lows. And what does that mean for the global economy? Typically, I mean, oil, it's changed a little bit in recent years because there's just this big push to go back to renewables and all that stuff. But typically oil is an indicator in the global strength, right? Because so many industries use oil for energy, whether it's manufacturing or transportation, whatever. And when you start to see oil drop off, it's a forward-leading indicator that potentially the demand's going to drop, meaning economic activity will start to slow down. That's just kind of one of the ways people read oil. Response to supply and demand surprises and wars and all that stuff too. But a lot of times it's an economic reading in terms of the demand. And right now you're seeing it's really starting to drop here with everything slowing down. And you're getting that across the board. You got airlines starting to slow down. You've got all the travel industry really getting spooked right now because of, you know, all the concerns, the health concerns going on out there. And the question was crypto going to be the safe haven? Was it going to react positively if the overall market dropped? Or was it going to lead the way down? Well, we got the answer, right? The answer was it reacted the same with the rest of the market. Maybe not to the same extent as some of these others, but it certainly reacted to the downside. And that just goes to show the broader risk-off attitude that you're seeing in the environment. And I saw it, you know, a decade ago when the financial crisis hit. You know, I was trading metals quite a bit back then, and everybody thought, oh, the metals are going to be a safe haven. And it wasn't. It was a mad rush for cash. And it was just literally dump everything, sell assets, and everything tanked, right? Real estate, oil, gold, stocks, everything tanked. Crypto wasn't really a thing back then. So we don't really have a lot of history into how it responds to true global financial crises. We've seen it in recent months. as a safe haven, like when there was rumors of Iran and other things. But when the rubber meets the road, when there is a full-on panic, even in the short term, you see crypto got hit here as well too. But everything's relative, right? There was a lot of rallying already. We were due for a pause. The big picture is always what interests me. What's the big picture? It's funny that now we're starting to see a lot of tweets and a lot of charts being posted with regards to this big inverse head and shoulder, whether it's the weekly chart or the daily or even the 3-day. I saw one. And, well, everyone's starting to really realize that this pattern has the potential to play out. And it's good. The more people that watch the pattern, the better, because a lot of times these things are self-fulfilling prophecies. You kind of get the buyer start stepping in because everybody wants to start pushing it higher here. But we've been kind of watching out for this since, during the run-up. I thought it'd be nice to see a pullback. Now, in fact, admittedly, I thought we'd see the pullback around 9,500s, and I thought that'd be a great place to form a right shoulder around 9,500s. It went another $1,000 higher, but 10K was that range. Couldn't really hold above 10K on the weekly. We saw some 10Ks, wicks over up as high as 10.5, but here we are getting the pullback. Now we're right back at the 22 weekly EMA. The 10 EMA on the weekly is still positive, and we're seeing this potential. This is what I'm watching out for, is in the coming weeks, do we start to form this right shoulder? Ideally, I want to see it hold above 8,200. Holding above 8,200 would keep the positive stance in place. The size of the retracement would be contained to the 618 retracement on the fib levels. And so ideally, this is where you want to see this right shoulder start to form here. And then, of course, once the volume starts to come back in, that's what you want to see too on the upside. Volume coming back in as it starts to push higher. If it breaks out of this pattern, then a measured move target, it's going to be pushing 14K on this breakout if we can get that. So, of course, that's not going to happen overnight. There'll be some ups and downs along the ways, but it's interesting to see that we got the halving coming up here as this right shoulder starts to form. So maybe we get that breakout right into that halving, which is in May. And then after that, we'll see where things go. If the global markets continue to sell off, we get the broader sell-off across the space, stock markets really go into a brutal bear market, then I would not be surprised to see some of that continue to spill over into the crypto space as the loss of confidence across the economies really starts to take hold. And that's just the way things go, people. The big institutions, the funds, start to get a little more defensive, raise some cash, all that stuff. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that one plays out. So that's the Bitcoin. Now going to the near-term action, going to the details here for the traders, like myself, of course. Where are we in regards to the big picture here? And so I'm going to zoom in here for us. This is the 4-hour view, just kind of going back a few days, right? Nothing major here, but looking at the 4-hour view. Now, if we look at it from a purely technical standpoint, the trend started to really cross over here when the 10 EMA crossed below the 22 EMA on the 4-hour and just has continued. Notice that there's been few attempts to rally back into that moving average, and they've all failed here on the most recent bounce. It's pretty anemic so far. Not a lot of bounce action. You are starting to see a little bit of a bullish divergence show up here after this most second attempt, which on the Bitcoin chart yesterday or today, this morning's undercut the low we saw here from a couple of days ago. And so that's typically a good thing because it kind of washes out the last people that were dip buying back here, and then it starts to go ideally. But we've not seen any sort of confirmation. The trend is still very much downward. Lower lows, lower highs continues to be the case. And so got to remain a little cautious here. But as I remember what I said, look at the alts. I think the altcoins are going to start to show a little bit of early indication as to when this starts to turn. And if you look at some of the bigger cap names, you are starting to see some potential signs of that happening here. So that's what I'm looking at now. To be totally transparent here, while I am still a little bit cautious looking at some downside, I've started to reload here again. I took a little bit of a bounce trade, was a little bit heavier on the ETH side, scaled out into that. We'll look at that one next, and was waiting for the pullback. We've seen the pullback, and so now I'm starting to take a little bit of entry points here. And my thought process is really play it tight. This is a bounce trade, not going to go crazy here. The trend is clearly not changed yet, and so I'm not going to go all in on crazy margin, get super aggressive on the alts just yet. I'm just taking some shots here. But what I'm going to be playing it is watching this most recent swing low, very tight. If I get wicked out, I get wicked out. No big deal. I'm just not going to give it much room to the downside because we've seen the test to the downside. This now needs to hold if a true bounce is going to play out. And if it does start to play out, then what I'm looking for, obviously the first test is going to be this little swing high around 8,900. That's also the 22 EMA on the 4-hour. And then above that, you know, you've got, it's basically at 9K at that point, psychological 9K. And then 9,200 is kind of your first big resistance level between 92 and 94. And that was this little last breakout point here. So that's what I'm going to be watching out for here over the weekend. I'm going to probably take it a little bit easier. I might have some positions going, but I'm not going to be doing a lot of active trading over the weekend. It's been a busy week, both in the stock market and the crypto markets. And I'm just going to take a break. It's just been crazy here. And so that's what I'm looking at here in the very short run. But just keep in mind, big picture, still very much trending downward. It's just got a little overextended to the downside here near term, and so some bounce action would be ideal. How does that play out? So potential double bottom, right? Maybe you got this guy playing out. If it rallies to say that 89.50 and fails, then look for a third drop that's higher. That could be a little inverse reversal pattern there, and then basically the same scenario. If it can break out above that, just would be the timing would be different, but you're looking at 9,200, 9,400 after that. So that's my thoughts on the BTC here. Going to ETH, I'm going to go ETH USD first. ETH. Let's go to Coinbase. So this was my thought yesterday. So I saw the drop here. This is the 4-hour view again. Started to do some dip buying here. Maybe a little too early. Started to buy. First shot was around 220. Then it bounced up, but then it started to really sell off over, you know, the next couple of hours. That was kind of the scare. I held my positions. I was playing it loose. Didn't have a hard stop in place. I had a mental stop, but in fact, I added here and said, you know, I'm still positive on a bounce. We got the bounce, but I started to pay attention to this zone right here. Now, for those of you that have taken the videos, you know about the moving averages that I like to use, and specifically, I like to use moving average pairs. And I go into the videos talking about why a pair is beneficial, because it gives you a little bit of a value zone, if you want to call it that. And that's just what I tend to use for targets, right? Very rarely does any sort of instrument respect just one moving average to the penny all the time, right? I mean, there's times where, yeah, it'll cut above and below, but when you use a pair, it kind of gives you a little bit more data. It gives you the trend, it gives you what they are relative to each other, but it also gives this value point. And what I like to use is the 10 and the 22 EMA. And so when we started to get this bounce, once it started to cross over that 230s mark, and I posted in the charts yesterday saying, hey, look for between 230, 240 is kind of what I'm looking for as my target. I'm already starting to scale out. And sure enough, I mean, we went up to 239, and that was pretty much it. And then it started to pull back. And so what I was looking for is that pullback. Ideally, I said I wanted to get a higher low above this support. Technically, it did. The wick low here was 209. We saw a wick low this morning at around 213. Starting to get that bounce here on that 1-hour chart. I zoomed in. That was kind of more my tactical view. And so I started to take some shots here around 225, 222, and just starting to scale in here a little bit. And it's the same thought process, just looking for a bounce. But keep in mind, it's high risk. I'm betting on a reversal here with no confirmation yet, right? Trending average, moving averages are still trending lower, still making potentially a lower high. And so certainly it's higher risk reversal trade, but I'm looking at a little bit of a double bottom scenario trying to play out. Same thing, RSI, a little bit of a bullish divergence here. MACD starting to tick into the green. And so from a big picture perspective, it's way too early to say if the low is in. I can certainly say that a low is being put in right now, a low, but is that like a couple of days or is that the low, right? It's way too early to say. The best you could do right now is, if you're on the trading side, maybe look at some, you know, kind of early entries here. If you're on the longer term view, I'm going to repeat, you know, my personal approach is always just don't blow the whole wad in one shot, right? From a longer term perspective, it's always best to kind of like layer in, scale in, especially during these crazy weeks, these big sell-offs, because you don't know if they continue into next week. And so got to save some bullets in case you do get those opportunities to get in at, say, 8,200, right? And so that's my thought process. But in the near term, from a trading perspective, I can be a little bit more nimble, a little bit more quick. And so I'm okay with taking these little shots here on these double bottom trades. Sometimes I'm using margin just to make it worth my while because I'm not expecting a big move. So even if I get 20, 10, 20, 30 bucks out of this move on margin, it starts to add up. But I'm not going to give it much to the downside either. If it starts to roll over, then just get out of the way and wait for things to play out. So that's kind of my thought process here. But I'm thinking ETH has a potential to bounce here. A little double bottom starting to show up. And again, this is an early indicator that maybe ETH is going to lead the way. It's still showing some good relative strength versus Bitcoin. If we look at the ETH BTC chart, I'm going to go to the daily view. Notice the longer term trend of Ethereum versus Bitcoin. It just barely pulled right back into the 22 EMA on the daily. Yes, it undercut it, but it hasn't even closed below it. If it gets back over this range here, I mean, wow, the resilience, the strength of the bulls is good. And basically after 0.028, you're in new relative highs here, and the bull trend will continue. I'm guessing at that point you start to really see the BTC Dominance Chart start to drop off again. So I'm still on the side of, I think the altcoins will continue to outperform here in 2020. And so that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking at these dips, these big weekly sell-offs as potential opportunities to start scaling into some of those here. Let me look at Apple real quick here because I've got, those are good, okay. I'm going to have to switch over to my other screen because I had some, I don't want to say heavy positions, but decent sized enough that I need to start taking action on those guys there. All right. So that's the thought on Ethereum here, the big cap names. Again, those are some of the ones. And so what are some of the other leaders, right? Some of the ones showing good relative strength. And yeah, you're already pointing it out on the comments there. Link is one of them. Tezos, I think, has held up pretty good here. So let's start deep diving into some of those here. These may be potential names to look at as we head into a new week. If things next week, for example, start to bounce and we get a bounce week, then yeah, you want to start looking right now as to what are those potential names that may start to hold up here. And again, that's big picture view, right? If you wouldn't be surprising to see a little bit of a green week here next week. But the big question still remains, is that it? Is it over? It's way too early to sell. You could get one of these scenarios where you get a drop like we had this week, and then for 2 or 3 weeks, kind of some sideways action. Looks like it's holding, and then you get the shakeout, which undercuts everything and then gets going, right? It's just, markets are brutal sometimes. They do that. They shake you out. They wick you out, and then they get going. And that's just the way the game goes sometimes. So could see one of those. I think a near-term low may be starting to form here. Is it the low? It's way too early to tell. And again, just remember, technically speaking, there are no signs of bullishness just yet. Just some potential reversals trying to take hold here. Some of the names that are outperforming, we saw Link in the last live stream. And look at Link. I mean, almost perfectly bounced to the breakout point, to the line. And just got some volume coming in, a little bit of a pause, still showing some good relative strength. But now it's testing this resistance here, the most recent highs. And so here's the real test, right? Was it breakthrough, or is that it? Was it a double top? So this is where you really want to start paying attention to it. It had that nice pause. If you bought the dip here, this is a great bounce. But now you wanted to see the test, right? So 2 ways this could play out. Obviously, you could just roll over here and it's done, double top. But ideally, what you want to see is some sideways action, lower volume pause, and then get going from there. That'll really set up for a nice breakout if it can just sit tight here for a day or two and just consolidate some of this move here. Going to the 4-hour view, the moving averages are still holding, and so I'd be paying attention to that moving average pair as long as it holds above the 4-hour 22. And if it starts to pull back, this is kind of the last breakout point, so holding above this would also be ideal, which is about 4,300. That's where I want to see it at most pull back if it starts to pull back from here. But looks like it's on the verge of a potential breakout, and that's good. It's been one of the stronger names versus Bitcoin this week after bouncing from that prior breakout points. So that one's good. We looked at ETH already, looking at Tezos here, Tezos BTC. Little bit of a tight range. Pulled right back to that 50% on the fib retracement after this little top here. A lot of volume came in here on this candle that popped above, and so now that's kind of the line in the sand, right? You had that big candle, a lot of volume came in, and it's just been consolidating right below that high. This is the breakout point in the near term, so getting over that 3,300 mark, if it starts to close above that on the 4-hour chart, that's where you want to see it start to take off. And at that point, you've got a clear support zone. You've got a clear support zone established. If it breaks out from here, then this is now your support, right? It held, but it's not held yet because it hasn't confirmed to the upside. This could just be a distribution pause, and then you break lower from here. So it's kind of a decision time here for Tezos, but Tezos again, recently at least, has been one of the stronger names. But still watching the USD chart, you had that big pullback right back to about 260. That was the 50% retracement. So far, it's held a little bit of support here, but there's not been any follow through to the upside. So if you're taking the same approach on the dollar pair, 295 is really the level you want to see it start clearing on the USD side. If it breaks below that 260 level, then 230 is your gotta hold level. That's the 618. That's also kind of a prior base back here. And so ideally, that's the lowest you want to see this pullback go if this is going to remain in a broader bull trend on that daily chart. So far, the indication is it is, but now you want to see some follow through here. You want to see this guy start to move higher if things are going to turn around, if it's going to lead the way up. So Tezos, one of the stronger names here. There was a couple of big ones this week. There always are, even when the market's really tanking. Aeon was kind of in play here, bouncing a little bit. Look at the throwback entry it gave you. It had that rally right to the top. Then when things got smacked down, it pulled right back and just a quick reaction up. It's a tough one. It's wide and loose, smaller cap name, but certainly has been in play. If we go to the node insiders here, the bull momentum index still showing red, weak across the board. The trading bots have been short here for a little bit. The oversolds are spiking, and so that's continuing to spike there. What else here? Polymath. Oh my God, Einsteinium. The crap coins are the ones rallying right now. Dragon. I still have some dragons from back in the day. Oh man, but they're pretty much worthless even with this most recent rally. But that's really it. KNC, KuCoin shares. Not a lot of life on the board here. Let's pull up the bot status here for the 4-hour and the daily view. I'm assuming most of them are, well, it's not too bad here. Let's see. And again, keep in mind this trading bot is versus Bitcoin. So the only one that's bullish and long right now is Link, of course. And we saw that here a couple days ago. Link was kind of the only one holding up. ETH, flat, showing some caution. I'm still positive on that one here. Let's see here, Neo. This one's short here. Lumens. Tezos is showing caution. It is flat, but just because very easily turn green gear if it starts to get going. That's really it. A lot of red. Litecoin, interesting. Litecoin BTC. I thought Litecoin was holding up better. Let's go look at that guy there. Litecoin BTC here. No, maybe not. It's saying red. It's kind of short right now on Litecoin, but I had this level marked out as a potential support zone. We're kind of living below that now, so didn't really hold up too well. Much below this, then you're looking at around 0.064 as your next downside target if it continues lower here. What else here? Tron, weak and short. Bitcoin Cash, weak and short. Binance, yeesh. Atom. I was looking for Atom to potentially bounce last week. Never happened. That was a failed bounce. And of course, with this market weakness, it looked like it was going to get going, looking for that breakout, and just boom, quick drop, made a new low. And so that one, for whatever reason, has just been really weak as of late. All of 2020 has just underperformed Bitcoin and, kind of bucked the trend here like some of these other altcoins. And keep in mind, this had a strong Q4, so maybe that's why it kind of rotated out. But some of these other names have just been much stronger versus BTC here. Let me go to some of the big caps here. XRP, nothing exciting just yet. Just kind of choppy. XLM. Stellar Lumens, looking like its cousin XRP. Not a whole lot going on there. Binance Coin. Interesting. Binance back to the breakout points. This might be where you want to look at it if you're liking it. It's got to hold this line here. Look at how it wicked right into that and is bouncing. Now, technically, this chart's kind of bearish looking, right? This big retracement, not too positive, but if it's going to bounce, this is where you want to see it bounce. Now, if I'm trading this, I'll probably just go for a bounce trade if that was me, right? I'd be looking for a bounce trade to like the 50%, maybe the 618. And then I'd wait for either a higher low to form or to really get back to the highs and then look at it again. But, the daily chart's not particularly bullish per se, but it is at support now. So a lot of these names where people were really FOMOing into a couple of weeks back, I cautioned, hey, these pullbacks are going to happen, but look at them as potential opportunities to kind of jump in those names you missed out on, the names you were FOMOing into. Now is the chance to potentially look at those. EOS, giving back a lot of the gains, but look at this. Go to the weekly chart. This is where you want to see these names hold. I'm going to zoom in here in a sec. Hold on. Hold on. So remember we were talking about these big bases, these big lows potentially being formed on a lot of these names, and they broke out above these highs and had a pretty good rally. Now we're seeing them basically retrace that rally, but you want to see them start holding above these prior resistance points, right? The highs that we saw in November, the highs that we saw in September. Those are the little resistance points that we finally blasted through. Now they're retesting them from the upside, and so you want to see them hold. If they start to crack below these, then that's just a bad sign all around for this longer term lows being put in some of these alts. Cardano is another one, for example, here. Right, going back to the resistance there, let me zoom in for you guys. Apple crossing 270, that's good. That's a good thing. It's a good thing. The trade is working. All right. So yeah, Cardano, right, had that big rally, pulling right back, bouncing right at the 10 weekly EMA, right to this prior breakout point. This is the weekly chart, just taking a longer term view on some of these things. This is where you want to see a lot of these names start to hold, because if the alts are going to continue to show some good relative strength throughout 2020 versus Bitcoin, you know, we want to see some support start showing it, the buyers start stepping in and around these levels. And you're seeing that in a lot of areas. Let me see BCH real quick. BCH, BTC here. Similar price action on BCH. Again, this was the breakout point. Let me zoom in a little bit. It's not that wide. More like that. These yellow lines are just prior resistance levels, so don't look at that yet. But same thing. BCH had that big breakout, broke above the November highs. A lot of volume came in, pulling right back. If you're a BCH bull, then this is where you want to see it start holding. So similar pattern in a lot of names. And so that's why I'm kind of looking at the bigger picture still, thinking longer term, you could see the alts continue to outperform. Link still looking pretty good there. Let's look at some of these other names. Neo. Let me see Zcash. A little bit of a bull flag type form action here, right? You had the rally, a little bit of a pause right at the moving averages. Does it hold? This is where you want to start paying attention to some of these names. Monero BTC right back at the moving averages on the weekly, a little bit of a pullback right to the line again. So, you know, you get the idea. The same general scenario potentially could start playing out, and it's showing up across the board in a lot of the alts. So if they're going to start to rally, you want to see the support come in and start to show some bounce action here, along with Bitcoin, of course. You want them to start outperforming as Bitcoin rallies, because then that shows that the broader space is going to start moving positive again here. Looking at Mana, Decentraland, giving up the ghost tears. It finally done going down. I don't know. I figured it'd drop here after this little double top we saw. The Mana reaction wasn't too positive after the launch last week, so who knows. It was kind of the sell and use scenario. My target on the downside was the mid threes. We hit that already. It's basically back to this breakout point. I was looking at this basically. So when we saw that event go live, Mana started to do this little double top. I was pretty much betting on a drop to the threes, and we're seeing that here. And so maybe that's it. That's the big question, right? Is it it? Is it done? Do we start to bounce here? Or is Mana just, that was the run, the anticipation run into go live? Who knows? But if you're liking it, starting to form a little support here above 4 cents. Dash, how's the Dash looking? Actually, Dash wasn't too bad here on the BTC 4-hour view. Again, Dash got crushed here recently along with everything else, underperformed Bitcoin significantly, but it formed a low here a couple days back along with the rest of the market, but this one made a much higher low, not even a double bottom, and so showing some good relative strength here, and it's about to test this big resistance point here, so that's what I'd be watching. If it can start to recover above that 10.5 on the BTC pair, that looks good. Then I'm either watching for a breakout move or a throwback entry, a higher low type of thing, something like that. So then above that, your next target's around 11.9 and 1300 on the Dash BTC pair. Now looking at it from the Dash USD on Coinbase, again, big picture view still very much bearish. I mean, You got to put that into perspective, right? These are not necessarily bullish looking charts. The daily charts are just brutal. Still very much trending lower, but if you start to zoom in here, are we starting to see the beginnings of a reversal taking place here? If you start to hold above the 4-hour 22 EMAs, then things start to look more positive at that point. So short answer is, yeah, I think a lot of these are finding a little bit of a bounce place. Where do they go from here? Apple squeeze continues. Good stuff. I'm out on this one now. I had an automatic buy here at the 270 mark, so Apple's done. AMD still popping, looking good. And the stocks were due for a little bit of a short squeeze, so that's it. Pretty much done on this guy. We'll see if it pulls back. Good stuff. I'm just going to close this one out. No need to look at it anymore. All right, here, nuggets. Oh, yeah, looking at the stock markets. We looked at gold here earlier at the start of the stream. And, the gold stocks were just getting hammered today because, one, stocks were dropping, two, gold was dropping. And so you saw the nugget really get smacked down here the last couple of days. Huge gap down here in the morning. If gold continues to pull in, if the market bounces next week, then I think nugget continues to get smacked. But, man, what a drop in nugget there overnight. Big gap down here. Breaking below support. A little double toppy now. So any bounces into $28, that's where I'd be watching. Maybe a gap fill. If it fills the gap there and then starts to retreat, looks done, at that point, you want to go with the dust. The dust is the better trade at that point, especially after the big run we've had in gold. Then you can see this guy kind of do some catch up, some bounce action here. And this is basically the inverse of nugget, so that's what I'd be watching there. All right, here, land, F land. It's not even called that anymore. I still call it that. Land here, let's see here. Looking at the land. Man, this guy is just so wide and loose. And I haven't followed this project in forever, so I don't know what drove this prior rally. But it is potentially breaking trend here, so I'd be a little bit more cautious with this. Maybe the rally has played out and it's due for a little bit more consolidation here. And at that point, you're just looking at higher lows, right? So, does it hold above this guy? Does it hold above this guy type of thing? That could be it right now. You could be seeing that little bit of a bounce. But until it got back above this big bullish engulfing or bearish engulfing candle, I'd be real cautious with that guy. That's about 340. Oh, let's see here. VeChain USD got smacked this week. I was looking for a potential hold of support. Nope, just dropped. So now you want to see VeChain on the upside. If it's going to bounce, first resistance is going to be that 0.063. It's going to be the first bounce on the upside there. Land, we did that one. Engine, or Enigma, not engine. ENG. Man, just continues to cut through those levels like nothing. Dropping here, didn't hold it. Actually bounced here a little bit. This was a nice little bounce trade. I'm betting that was a bounce to the fib level. Let's go check that out. So you had this pullback. You had the bounce. And it was about a 382 with the candle body, about 50% on the fib, which the 50% lined up pretty well with this prior resistance there. And then after that, the market caught up with it as everything tanked. Had quite the drop. New relative lows. Look at that. Undercutting those lows there. So many names making new relative lows as well. Not all of them. The big cap names are still looking better than the small caps. We just looked at the charts of EOS and Cardano and Bitcoin Cash. The weekly charts are still kind of pulling back into those prior breakout points above the November highs. But some of these small cap names are just, man, no love for the small caps yet. It just continues to get smacked to the downside. And, there's a few crap coins pumping here and there, but most of the small caps are just still very much lagging here. Going to the alerts here. Let me see if there is anything. Yes, everything's oversold. We know that. Don't need to look at that. I'm going to go take this guy here. So power pivots, Matic, ZIL, KNC, BQX on the move. Let's go look at that. Speaking of small caps. Voyager, Ethos, BQX. Nice little pop there. All right. So you had this is the daily view. So obviously it was on the move a few days back. Look at this moving average here. The pullback held at the 10-22 pair. And now it's really get going here again today. So BQX. There you go. Link is never going down ever again. Right? Link is so strong. So there you go. What else here? We looked at some of these ZIL. Matic's dead. For you Matic bulls out there, no offense, I'm just reading the tape. Matic, not a whole lot. I had a power pivot, but that's a tougher one on Matic because who knows? Eventually it'll be a pop. Eventually it'll break out of this range, but right now it's still very much range bound. Zilliqa, yeesh. Pocket pivot on ARC. H-bar was showing some life. This one's a tough one though because it had that big pullback. Generally, after a flash in the pan move like this, when it gives up that much, it's usually bearish longer term, right? That's just usually not a good pattern. What you want to see is a big push, maybe give back half of that last day and kind of hold above that, and you get going again. This is bearish, undercutting the moving averages, but that being said, could be setting up for a nice little bounce trade here. You got this low that came in, good move up, pulling back, starting to really coil up here, and so you could be setting up for a little bit of a bounce trade here, getting above this zone. What is that, 420s, 430? Then that's also this prior support back in here, so that's your little breakout point. If it gets above that, then I'd be looking at either 500 to 540 as your next targets. After that, man, I'd be really surprised if it really took those levels out, considering the price action, but could make for a bounce trade. Will the SPX bounce? I think so. I think it's due. The panic is just full on right now. But is it done? Who knows? It's way too early. I mean, that looks bearish as heck. You can see that continue for the next month or so. Bounces along the way, of course, but that looks pretty bearish. But yeah, I think it's bouncing here. I mean, I took some bounce trades today, so far so good. Tomo. But from a long-term investment perspective, I don't know. I'm not ready to say it's over yet. In fact, we all know that it was due for a longer-term pullback. This could be the beginning of the bear. Tomo still holding the trend. Longer-term chart on Tomo still holding the trend. Be watching this right here. This is an interesting consolidation right here. Kind of heading into March. All right. Let's see here. BAT, ENJ. Yeah, I mean, Enigma, if you're looking at it as a oversold bounce, yeah, I agree. A lot of those are oversold. But in this market right now, I'm just more inclined to look at the names showing good relative strength versus trying to bottom fish the weaklings. Just because a lot of the weaklings are continuing to make new lows, right? So there's no guarantee that just because it's oversold, it's going to find some lows to bounce from. And when you're at new lows, more often than not, the bounces are sold into because there's got the bag holders that are finally just giving it up. And so that's kind of my thought. I prefer to buy the relative strength versus the way oversold names right now. At some point that'll change, and it'll make more sense to go buy the oversold names when the market is strong, because then eventually they'll catch up. But right now it's not the case here. But here's ENJ kind of pulling back. Saw the sell-off along with Decentraland. This one's holding up a little bit better, a little bit here at the prior breakout point, so maybe this is where you see it bounce from. I'd be watching this one as a good reversal point right here, just like a lot of these names, right? They had that pullback, bouncing a little bit of a higher low. That's where you want to see them start to hold. Did we look at Tron yet? Tron. TRX USD. There's better names out there. And BAT, the basic attention token. Let's go look at it from the dollar pair first here. Little potential double bottom, maybe. Maybe. Yeah, and then there's the SEC. Don't forget about that. Yeah, we'll see. I'd like to see this guy take out that 22 EMA. That would confirm this little near term. That's resistance here, about 23 cents on the BAT USD side. Looking at it from the BAT BTC pair, much stronger, nice higher low, potentially about to take out some resistance here. So yeah, this is not a bad one. Not a bad little name to be watching here over the weekend. Could see some bounce action here. Again, that's all at this point. That's all I'm looking for, some potential bounce action. Considering the broader trend is still very much downward, it's way too early to say the low is in. It feels like a low is in, but I mean, you know, you just never know. You could just be seeing the drop here again. So Ocean has been on a little bit of a tear lately. Ocean Protocol, well, maybe it's ready to go going again. Smaller, these low volume names are just tough. Small cap. Singularity. It's a name I hadn't seen in a while. Long time low being established here. Maybe these names can finally get going. Yeah, the small cap names are just, I don't know, they're much tougher right now. I'm still thinking sticking with the bigger names is the way to go for now. At least until things really get going again. Keeper Network, very good relative strength here. Feeling a little bit loose, wide and loose here near the highs, but still holding the moving average, so got to give it the benefit of the doubts. Some volume coming in here near the highs. Potential distribution showing up here, but hasn't cracked yet, so still holding up there. All right. I'm going to start to wrap it up, guys. I've been going on almost an hour here. Just kind of the weekly wrap up. Just recapping BTC here real quick. I'm going to just cycle through some of these names that we haven't looked at already. We've looked at Bitcoin, BitTorrent, there's Dash, Decred, Elf, Engine, EOS. A lot of these names, especially the bigger caps, right back to support. ETH, we'll see. Needs to hold. Things are vulnerable here, right? You're still got the potential for another leg down. Remember the big picture view, Bitcoin 8,200 is kind of the max I want to see it drop. Maybe 81 on a wick or something, but other than that, you don't want to see it drop much further. ETH or IOTA, Eiffel Tower, I think it's still shut down, right? Link, probably the better name out there right now. There's Lisk, Litecoin showing some weakness here. Mana, Neo, OMG. But that's it. We'll see how next week looks. A lot of it's going to depend on the weekend here, what the global sentiment is. If you see healthcare looking like maybe it's getting better, the cases are not going through the roof, then things will, at least in the near term, take a positive turn. I'm guessing the market will see a little bit of a short squeeze here, the stock markets, and get a little bit of bounce. After that, though, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Do we bounce, make a lower high, or was that it? And very rarely does it end in just one fell swoop. And in fact, when you look at the longer term view of things, if the stock market is going to top, rarely is it just kind of a 1 week event, right? Most of the time when it starts to top, it's choppy and it'll take a couple of months before it's finally, that's it, it gets done and it rolls over. But this was quite the week. One for the record books. I mean, massive drops across the board. Every major stock market in the world was hit this week. No place to hide. Commodities getting hit, stocks getting hit, Forex markets, turmoil there, cryptos getting hit. But maybe some good opportunities, maybe some bounce trades in order here, at least for the next few days. So we'll see how things go. But that's it. That's going to be it for today, guys. Let me go back to BTC real quick here. Looking at ETH. Got some potential trades starting to scale into, but again, playing it slow, keep it cautious. This is what I'm looking for, some double bottoms. Got to get above these moving averages at least. Bitcoin 8,600 still failing at the 10 EMA on the 4 hour, so much below 8,500, and that's pretty much cooked in my opinion. Probably see another leg down. Maybe we get that 8,200 finally. So wow, oh wow, what a week it's been. Red. Stay safe out there, guys, and, you know, spend some time away from the charts and away from Twitter and all the bad news here for a day or so. You'll feel much better. Thanks for being here as always. Appreciate all the comments, the likes, the thoughts. We'll see you all in the next one. Take care, everyone.